Once upon a time, there lived an ill-tempered widow woman with 2 daughters. The younger daughter, Rose by name, was the prettiest, kindest girl you could hope to meet, and as different from her sister Griselle as day is from night. Truth to tell, Griselle was the image of her disagreeable mother, so it's no wonder that they got along very well together. Rose was treated worse than a servant by her mother and sister, who made her do the hardest and least pleasant jobs around the house without lifting a finger themselves. Every day, Rose had to follow the same routine, scrubbing the floor, washing all of yesterday's dishes, peeling potatoes, sweeping the hearth, and walking a mile and back to the well for water. And whenever Rose's work failed to please her mother or sister, they were all too quick to punish her. As strange as it may seem, there are people in life who mistake abuse for hard work and violence for discipline. Rose had the misfortune of living with 2 such persons. Rose accepted her lot in life without tears or sulks. Indeed, she was a quiet girl who kept most of her thoughts to herself. But on warm summer days, when she walked down to fetch water from the well, she would sing to herself in a voice pure and sweet. One morning, as Rose was drawing water from the well, an old countrywoman appeared, carrying a heavy bundle of sticks under her arm. She wore a shawl round her thin shoulders. "Would you please give me a drink?" she asked in a tired voice. "I am so thirsty." "Of course I will," said Rose. "As soon as I've filled my pitcher, you may have as long a drink from it as you want." The old woman was really a fairy in disguise. She had heard about Rose's sweet nature, but she wanted to test the girl for herself. After she had drunk the water, Rose asked if there was anything further she could do. The fairy said, "You are a dear child, polite and gentle. I'm going to give you a present. Whenever you speak, flowers and jewels will fall from your lips." And with that, she vanished. Rose stood there in silence for several minutes, wondering if she'd dreamt her encounter with the old woman. Then Rose picked up her pitcher and ran back to the cottage, for she realized that, dreamed or not, the encounter had made her later than usual. Rose's mother was waiting on the front steps. Her expression was particularly disagreeable, even for her. "Lazy good-for-nothing!" she screamed as Rose rushed up the path. "Spending all day in the woods when you know how much work there is to be done at home. I'll teach you never be late again. I'll teach you!" "I'm said Rose. And then she and her mother stared in amazement at the pearl, 2 daisies, and 3 diamonds that had fallen from her lips. "Good heavens above!" exclaimed Rose's mother at last. "What has happened to you? Are you bewitched, daughter?" It was the first time in years she'd called Rose her daughter. Then Rose, crying softly the whole while, told her mother the story of the poor old woman at the well. As she spoke, flowers and jewels kept falling from her lips until a beautiful bouquet and a small treasure in precious stones lay at her feet. The mother listened in silence. She tried to look directly at Rose, but her gaze returned again and again to the gems on the ground where Rose stood. By the time Rose had finished her story, her mother could barely conceal her excitement. It hadn't taken her too terribly long to figure out that 2 enchanted daughters could produce twice as many jewels as one. Then the old woman ran into the house in search of Griselle, leaving Rose, who was still weeping, alone on the front porch. "Griselle! Griselle!" shouted the old woman. "Come here quickly and listen to me." Griselle, who had been setting her hair, appeared with an annoyed expression. "What is it, Mother?" whined Griselle. "I'm busy." "Come over here at once," said her mother. Look over there where your sister is standing. You see all those jewels at her feet? An old beggar woman who was really a fairy cast a spell on Rose so that every time she speaks, precious gems fall out of her mouth. And all because she gave the old hag a drink of water. Now you have to go down to the well and wait for the beggar woman. And when you're nice and polite to her, she will give you a reward just like she did for Rose. "Oh, all right, Mother," said Griselle sulkily. "But first I have to finish my hair and change my dress and put on my bonnet and my good walking shoes." At last Griselle was ready, and she set out on her mile-long walk to the well. It was a beautiful summer day. The sky was a brilliant blue, birds sang happily, and the flowers seemed to shine on their stems. But Griselle noticed none of these things as she made her way to the well and her meeting with the old beggar woman. Griselle found her way to the well and leaned up against a tree with her arms folded and her face wearing a bored expression. "And what if she doesn't even come?" she thought to herself. After what seemed to her like hours, she finally heard the sound of someone approaching the well. Looking up, Griselle was surprised to see not a beggar woman, but a very elegant and grandly dressed woman of middle age. "Good day to you," said the lady pleasantly. "I have been out walking so long this warm summer morning. Could you please give me a drink of your well water?" This grand and elegant lady was none other than the same fairy who had appeared to Rose in a different disguise. Griselle, who was expecting an old woman in tattered clothes, saw no reason to be polite to someone so well-to-do. "Oh, for goodness sake," said Griselle, "do you think I'm here to serve you? Get a drink yourself if you must have one, but don't expect any help from me." "You are not very gracious," said the lady, without a trace of anger. "I think that you deserve a gift like your sister Rose, something which will be an indication to others of your true character and a reflection of your lack of kindness and caring." And so saying, she wandered slowly into the dark of the woods. furious to speak, Griselle set off on her walk back home. What a waste of my good time, she thought. She had made a long trip on a hot day just to be lectured by a perfect stranger, and she was returning home with nothing but a pair of sore feet to show for her trouble. Her mother, and especially her sister, would have a lot of explaining to do. Griselle's mother, who had been watching from the front window of the cottage, finally saw Griselle coming up the path and ran out to greet her. "Well, daughter?" she asked excitedly. "Well, indeed, mother," Griselle snapped. And then they recoiled in horror from the snake, 2 toads, and 3 lizards that had fallen from her lips. "Mercy on us!" cried the mother, jumping up on a stone to avoid the slithering creatures. "Mother, help me!" Griselle shrieked as a slimy eel slid out of her mouth. "Help me!" she implored again, but her mother seemed not to hear her. "This is a curse on us!" she suddenly said, her fear having turned to fury. "And it's your sister's fault! I know it! I'm sure of it! And I'm going to make her pay for it! Rose!" she shouted, jumping off the stone and making for the open front door. "Come out here immediately! Rose! Rose!" Rose, who had heard all from her room in the back of the house, knew that she would now be punished more horribly than ever before. Without waiting for her mother, she ran out the back door and far, far away into the deepest, darkest part of the forest, leaving the little cottage behind her forever. For hours that seemed like days, Rose ran on through the thick forest until it had become too dark to see her way. Exhausted and with nothing to eat or drink, she huddled beneath a tall tree and settled into an uneasy night's rest, thinking about all that had happened since that morning and wondering what would become of her. She knew that she had no home now and could never return to her mother and sister again. Next morning, as the sun brightened the dark forest and creatures began to stir, Rose was awakened by a sound in the distance. As it drew nearer, she peered through the thick trees and was finally able to make out a man on horseback. The rider was the king's son, and his fine horse was galloping towards her at top speed. "Good morning," said the handsome young man when he finally reached her. "I hope I haven't frightened you. I often go for a ride by myself early in the morning. What are you doing here all alone in the woods?" Lowering her head, Rose began to tell the prince her story. Flowers and jewels fell from her lips as they had the morning before. The prince was so moved by her story and by the girl's beauty that he immediately fell in love with her. "Dear Rose," he said gently when she had finished her tale, "you must come to my father's palace with me at once, where we shall be married." "Married, sir?" said the astonished girl. "But why should you wish to marry me?" "Because I love you," he said. "Oh, sir," Rose said, I couldn't possibly..." and she suddenly realized that neither flowers nor jewels fell from her lips as she spoke, nor would they ever again, because the prince's love had broken the kind fairy's spell. It was then that Rose understood what the fairy's gift had really been, a way for her to find the path towards a life of happiness with someone who truly loved her and would care for her happily ever after. Yes, you're probably wondering what became of Griselle and her mother. Very simple. They lived out the rest of their lives in the same little cottage with their friends.